After a long wait, the first DCU movie Superman released to rave reviews and a fairly strong box office, at least domestically. Superman successfully laid the groundwork for this universe, and now a sequel is in development. Kinda. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and become a member in the noble tier or above for early access to videos. James Gunn has confirmed that the next project that he is writing, which he'll also direct, is a movie featuring Superman. He referred to it as a sequel to Superman, but also said it's not exactly Superman 2, even if it does feature Superman in a larger role. Hearing that, the first thing that comes to mind is a World's Finest movie. It'd be a sequel, but not exactly, and with The Brave and the Bold seemingly taking its time, maybe Batman of the DCU could be introduced there. This, however, is not the case, as Gunn has confirmed that it is not World's Finest, and it is not Batman vs Superman. At this point, we can completely rule out Batman being involved. I also don't think a Superman and Wonder Woman movie is likely, since there is a Wonder Woman movie in active development right now and being put as a high priority. She's gonna be debuting there. Gunn also mentioned that he considers Peacemaker Season 2 to be a sequel to Superman, meaning that it could literally be anything, but then David Zaslav said that it is going to be a movie in the Super Family series. So it's a sequel, but not really. It's not World's Finest or Batman vs Superman or Trinity, but it is in the Super Family, so what exactly can this be? Well, I think it largely depends on what James means when he says it's not exactly Superman 2, because that can mean Superman isn't in the title at all, or it can mean it's simply not a solo movie. Maybe the sequel will be a shared sequel with another project, or just feature another franchise in its title. Deadpool and Wolverine, for instance, could be a good example. It's definitely a Deadpool movie first and foremost, but Wolverine is in the title, making it a Wolverine movie as well. Batman v Superman is also a great example, since most people don't consider it to be a Batman movie or a Superman movie, but rather its own franchise. In the case that Superman is still in the title, there are a few clear options. Following Superman and directly spinning off of it, Supergirl will release next year, showcasing her going on her own adventure, a natural follow-up to these two movies, and also the crypto shorts that are releasing throughout the year would be a shared sequel between Superman and Supergirl called, well, Superman and Supergirl. This would be a movie in which Superman and Supergirl have equal roles, both as the protagonists, and it is officially a sequel to Superman and Supergirl. With Clark and Kara present, they could explore their Kryptonian past, the vast differences between the two, their relationship with each other, and Kara meeting Superman's supporting cast while exploring how they were affected by their solo adventures. With both Superman and Supergirl as the protagonists, the most obvious choice for the main villain role is Brainiac. As Superman's second most recurring comic villain, Brainiac is long overdue for the main villain role in a live-action movie. He was planned for various unmade sequels and reboots and was considered for this Superman movie, but if there's any project he'd be perfect for, it's definitely a Superman and Supergirl movie. This is because Brainiac always has some sort of connection to Krypton. Sometimes he's an unrelated alien from another planet who collected the city of Kandor and bottled it. Sometimes he's responsible for the destruction of Krypton, and in many adaptations is a rogue AI from Krypton who led to Krypton's downfall. Regardless of the version, Brainiac is always more of a foil to Superman's Krypton side rather than his humanity, which would be perfect because the first movie was more about Clark accepting his humanity. The sequel could show him re-accepting his Kryptonian heritage, which he's kind of pushed aside in the first Superman movie, so that he finally finds a balance between the two. Then you have Supergirl, who obviously has a close connection to Krypton, and then depending on what they do with Brainiac, maybe she even remembers him. This is something that's been explored in adaptations, video games like Injustice 2, and animated series like My Adventures with Superman, but not in live action. Honestly, I don't have a preference for if Brainiac should be Kaluan or Kryptonian, but I definitely prefer more of an organic or at least android look rather than robotic, and he should definitely also be green. Maz, for instance, has a great adaptation of Brainiac, except his design kinda sucks. I don't like any aspect of that design. I would definitely not do that. More so his design from Injustice 2 is what I would go for. Aside from Brainiac, they can include some side villains that, in this version of the DC universe, would see their origins connect to or be caused by Brainiac. Brainiac can bring kryptonite with him and create Metallo and Titano, or maybe he experiments on people and creates Livewire and Parasite. Lex Luthor should return as a constant, but this time as a supporting villain, not an antagonist. Kara and Jimmy could have a romantic connection. More DC heroes can be included, like in the vein of the Justice Gang. Maybe in this world, Brainiac stole a city from Mars and brought Martian Manhunter, or Thanagar and brought Hawkman. Or maybe they could just bring back the Justice Gang and say they added a few members off screen, like the Atom, Captain Atom, Fire, Ice, I don't know. Finally, Superman was Earth-based and Supergirl is a cosmic adventure. A shared sequel between the two would have elements of both. There's a lot you could do with Brainiac in a shared sequel between Superman and Supergirl, making this what could be the perfect follow-up to Superman and Supergirl. However, I'm not exactly sure how likely it is, considering this definitely feels more like an actual Superman sequel than a few other possibilities. So why would James Gunn refer to this movie as not exactly Superman 2? Like, you can make the argument that it's not, but you can also make the argument that it is. I think something that might connect a bit more to what James Gunn is talking about would be Superman and the Authority. We've gotten some disappointing updates from Gunn regarding the Authority movie. The writing process hasn't been fruitful and the writer was apparently moved to another project. Some rumors, or based on how James Gunn said it, point to that actually being James Gunn himself. What if he was the writer of the Authority and decided to skip directly to the maybe planned follow-up that would have been a shared sequel between Superman and the Authority called Superman and the Authority? There is a comic called Superman and the Authority in which a weakened Superman puts together a new version of the Authority, which was followed up on by the World saga, in which Superman and the Authority head to World to liberate it from Mongol. That saga was fantastic, and Mongol is definitely my second choice behind Brainiac for who I'd like to see be the main villain of the next Superman movie the most. So frankly, I'd love for them to adapt this comic. In doing so, they'd be maybe skipping the Authority's original premise of being a ruthless, murderous team, but honestly, I definitely prefer how they are used in the World saga rather than their original premise anyway. The original premise is very, very edgy, and DC's response to the Authority back before they owned them in Superman vs. the Elite, or as it was called at the time, What's So Funny About Truth, Justice, and the American Way, makes me not like the concept at all. So honestly, I don't really want an Authority movie. I would, however, like a Superman and the Authority movie based on World saga. That in mind, Superman and the Authority would take inspiration from the World saga, in which Superman would bring together a ragtag group of heroes and take them to World to liberate it from Mongol. He doesn't need to be depowered. I think that's a bit unnecessary. It would also be really cool if they take elements from The Man Who Has Everything and put Superman under the spell of the Black Mercy, considering Mongol was the main villain of that, before he is then saved by the Authority. The Engineer would return as a member of the Authority and have a redemption arc. Midnighter, Apollo, and Manchester Black would be introduced, and then I'd include Supergirl and Hawkgirl as members. Supergirl just because she's a part of the Super family and I think should be included in the next Superman movie, while Hawkgirl is there to replace Swift as a member of the Authority. Obviously also include Krypto, depending on if he survives Supergirl or not. Along the way, you can include other villains like Draga, and assuming her appearance in the Suicide Squad isn't canon because I don't think it should be, Mongal. Following up on the first movie, it could be revealed that after being sucked into a black hole, the Superman clone ended up on World rather than my original thought of Bizarro World, and so Bizarro, who maybe deteriorated because of the wormhole, is a secondary villain, or I don't know, maybe he joins the Authority and then dies or something. Barring that, some other extraterrestrial villains can simply be placed in World as champions, like Maxima, Massacre, Kanjaro. I don't know, there are a lot of options. Along the way, you could also introduce Martian Manhunter as a captive on World, maybe the Qatar Hall version of Hawkman if they're going for that, also the same idea. Again, there's a lot of options for that. While Brainiac is my first choice, I would not be disappointed if this is the idea for the sequel. Mongol, again, is my second choice. This can also explain why Gunn doesn't consider it to be a straight up sequel, because they're going off-world, and thus the Superman supporting cast won't be included, at least not much. And then maybe Superman won't even be the protagonist, and so it makes sense that he would consider this not a Superman sequel, more so than Superman and Supergirl would be. Instead, we might mostly be seeing the Superman supporting cast, specifically the Daily Planet, in the Jimmy Olsen show that is rumored to be in development. At the same time, they can also not adapt that comic and instead integrate the Authority in as the replacement to the Elite in a loose adaptation of What's So Funny About Truth, Justice, and the American Way in a movie called Superman vs. the Elite. I think this is less likely, and at this point I think is less interesting, but in this case the villains would be the Authority, who would be a mix of the Authority and the Elite, and Manchester Black would be its leader. I don't think this is as likely since, well, for one, this movie kinda already exists in Superman vs. the Elite, but also this kinda just sounds like Superman 2, a Superman movie set in Metropolis with the Superman supporting cast and Superman villains. Don't get me wrong, I think Superman vs. the Authority isn't a bad idea. I just don't think it fits the criteria of what the sequel seems to be, and I also think there are far more interesting ideas to go for. I would rather other villains, not Manchester Black. I'd much prefer Mongol and Brainiac. Throwing a wild card pick into the mix with a bit of backing to it is Superman and the Legion of Superheroes, or maybe just Legion of Superheroes, since Superman and the Legion of Superheroes is a bit of a long title. Besides Batman and other super family heroes, the most fitting hero to share a title with Superman are definitely the Legion and all of its members. Gunn has mentioned the Legion recently as something difficult to adapt because he doesn't like time travel. However, he also mentioned he's thought about it, has confirmed the reference to Matter-Eater Lad and Peacemaker is canon, and signed off on Booster Gold, whose origin is not only rooted in time travel, so they're making a whole time travel show, but also his origin has ties to the Legion of Superheroes. He wears a Legion ring. Aside from the time travel aspect, the Legion generally feels very much up James Gunn's alley, and very much up the alley of the Silver Age-inspired Superman of the DCU. To be honest, I've never liked the idea of there being a set-in-stone future in the DC universe, especially one so simple as the Legion of Superheroes. I've always preferred the idea that the Legion simply believe themselves to be from our future, but are in reality from a different universe, where the present is the 31st century, and 1,000 years ago, Superboy was a famous hero, maybe the only one. With pocket universes being a part of both Superman and Peacemaker, they can absolutely do this by incorporating the Legion as a pocket universe. Maybe pocket universes in general are going to remain a big deal in this saga. I think it's entirely possible that Gunn was actually hinting at his next project, not debunking it. If that's the case, I do think Brainiac can still be the villain, considering Brainiac 5 should be present, but maybe not. Maybe they'd go for Legion villains like the Fatal Five or the Time Trapper. Legion of Superheroes would continue the Silver Age influence, as they can introduce the Legion as a part of Superman's backstory in the DCU. Maybe in the past he was Superboy, and maybe he joined the Legion at some point, or maybe they can be meeting for the first time now. Supergirl would definitely be included, while the Legionnaires I'd focus on are Saturn Girl, Brainiac 5, and Lightning Lad, while Phantom Girl, Chameleon Boy, and Timberwolf are used as side heroes. I kinda just like the 2000s cartoon, and I think they should take that as an inspiration, but also they should use the inspiration of Superman and the Legion of Superheroes comic from the 2000s, and then maybe use Earthman as its main villain. Like Superman and the Authority, this would set itself apart from being a straight-up Superman sequel, since, well, for one, Superman might not even be in the title, it could just be Legion of Superheroes, but even if he is, the Superman supporting cast wouldn't have a large role, as the setting would mostly be the 31st century, or the Legion's pocket universe, also in the 31st century. Taking more looks at the Superman family, there are obviously many more characters who can potentially be getting their own movies, but honestly I don't think any of them are. Superboy, the Connor Kent version, is technically possible, but man, I really do not want there to be 3 separate Kryptonian heroes with their own movies. Let's just focus on Superman, Supergirl, and I guess also Krypto for now. Save Superboy for way later. The same argument is true for Power Girl as well, but you don't even need that argument. There's many reasons why they shouldn't adapt that character. Mon-El's story has been told on Supergirl, and I'd prefer simply Legion of Superheroes at that point. Steel is a character I'd prefer to be a side hero. None of the villains or multiversal variants should get movies, so frankly, I don't think any of those characters are likely, except for maybe Lobo, who can maybe, if you stretch the definition, be considered a part of the Superman family, or at the very least, the Superman Rogues Gallery, and in that case, I do think James Gunn would want to make a Lobo movie. Lobo was teased by James Gunn from the very beginning when he took over DC. This then manifested itself in the casting of Jason Momoa in Supergirl. Lobo was apparently actually meant to be a part of the original Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow comics, so they're actually kind of putting him back with the movie. It's very likely that the Lobo teases were simply for that appearance, but who knows, maybe James Gunn is interested in a Lobo movie. Lobo would be very different from Superman, being darker, more violent, R-rated, and not exactly focusing on a wholesome character. But it would kind of be the meeting between everything he's done so far, between the cosmic side of the Guardians of the Galaxy, the hardcore, metal, R-rated, action-packed style of Peacemaker, while also including Superman, kind of merging all of his past projects. In this case, Lobo would be the focus, while Superman acts as an antagonist or supporting character in a space or foreign planet-based story. Lobo doesn't exactly have a rogues gallery of his own, but there is a slew of cosmic threats from across the DC universe that they can use. And maybe they could include a Green Lantern or two. All that said, while I think James Gunn can certainly pull off a Lobo movie, I kinda can do without it. Lobo is great and all, but I don't think he's as enjoyable as the main character, nor is he as fun in large portions. There are plenty of other DC characters I'd rather see getting projects, and more specifically, many more characters I think Gunn's talents would be better utilized for. Then again, I would have said the same thing about Peacemaker and Creature Commando, so I don't know, maybe this is the best thing possible. So all that said, the big 4 possibilities are Lobo, Lobo, Legion of Superheroes, Superman and the Authority, and Superman and Supergirl. In terms of what I would want to see, frankly, the more Superman sequel it feels, the more I want it. I kinda do want a Superman 2. So I'd rank Lobo at last place, followed by Legion of Superheroes, followed by Superman and the Authority, and finally, the most simple sequel to Superman out of these is what I want the most: Superman and Supergirl with Brainiac as the villain. But based on how Gunn has talked about this movie, I honestly have no idea what is most likely. I think Legion of Superheroes is very possible. I think Lobo is very possible. I think maybe we're reading too much into it, and Superman and Supergirl, even though it feels like a regular sequel, can definitely be very possible. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. What do you want to see the most, but also what do you think is the most likely? If I had to give an actual prediction, I'm gonna say Superman and Supergirl. Honestly, it's the safest bet. I think we might be reading too much into it, and it's definitely what I want the most.